Steve Urkel is one of the most famous characters in the history of television, instantly recognizable from the glasses and the suspenders pulled up too high to the voice behind "Did I Do That?", a line you could pick out of a lineup after one syllable. For a decade, he was one of the biggest stars on Friday nights in America. Here is what almost nobody remembers. He was never supposed to come back. Not for a second episode, not for a third. We will get into exactly what happened later, because it is not even the strangest thing about this show. Welcome back to the Throwback Network, where today we are counting down 15 weird facts about Family Matters, the show that started as a normal family sitcom and slowly turned into something else entirely. Before we get into the list, here is what else is coming. The real story behind Harriette Winslow getting recast for the final season involves on-set tension that took years to boil over. The actor playing baby Richie got swapped out and aged up 2 years almost overnight, with zero explanation given on screen. And one of the show's sweetest relationships ends in one of the saddest real-life postscripts of 1990s television. Starting at number 15. Number 15. The Winslows started as a spinoff. Family Matters did not start from scratch. It grew out of Perfect Strangers, the ABC sitcom about Balky and Larry, the mismatched cousins sharing an apartment in Chicago. Harriette Winslow, who would go on to anchor her own show for 9 seasons, began as a minor character on that series, an elevator operator and background face at the Chicago Chronicle, where Larry worked. Somebody at ABC decided that character deserved more, and the network billed her a husband, a family, and a house of her own, which is how Family Matters came to exist. One of the most iconic sitcom families of the 1990s exists because of an elevator scene in a completely different show. Number 14. Baby Richie was 2 different actors. In Season 1, Baby Richie, Harriette's nephew who lives with the Winslows, was played by twins, Joseph and Julius Wright, which was standard practice for infant roles and nothing unusual on its own. Season 2 is where it gets strange. Richie gets recast with a 4-year-old actor named Brighton McClure, known today as Brighton James from The Young and the Restless. And the show does not stop at recasting him, it ages him up as well. Richie goes from barely a year old to 3 years old in the span of one summer hiatus, with no explanation and no acknowledgement anywhere on screen. The show simply picks up as though nothing happened, and Richie is suddenly 2 years older and speaking in full sentences. A baby who could not walk turned into a preschooler over one summer break, and Family Matters never mentioned it once. Number 13. Jaleel White played at least 5 characters. Steve Urkel was not the only role Jaleel White played on this show. Stephen Urkel, Steve's smooth and confident alter ego, existed thanks to his own invention, the transformation chamber, and Myrtle Urkel, Steve's cousin, had White performing in a wig and a dress purely for comedic effect. Writers also worked one-off impressions into scripts specifically to give White more screen time. At certain points in the show's run, there were effectively 2 Urkels and 1 Urkel occupying the same house at the same time, all played by a single actor in an increasingly crowded sitcom. Number 12. Did I Do That? Wasn't the first pitch.
Did I do that?
The most quoted line in Family Matters history almost was not the line at all. Before landing on "Did I Do That?", Urkel's go-to response after breaking something or bumping into furniture, the writers tried simpler options first, including a straightforward "excuse me" that never landed the same way. Something about the phrasing of "Did I do that?" and the way Jaleel White delivered it clicked with the live studio audience in a way those earlier options never did. And that reaction alone is what cemented it as Urkel's signature line. The most quoted catchphrase of the decade could very easily have been something nobody ever repeated. Number 11. The gadgets became the whole plot engine. Once the transformation chamber showed up, the door opened for a lot more of this kind of story. Urkel's inventions turned into a recurring device from there, the Urkelbot among them, along with more gadgets built in his garage lab and entire episodes built around the idea that Steve had invented something that was about to cause problems. What started as a family sitcom picked up a second identity along the way, functioning like a low-budget science fiction anthology, one bizarre invention at a time. That approach worked for a while and gave the writers a reliable plot machine whenever they needed one, but leaning on any gimmick long enough eventually turns a surprise into a crutch. Every few episodes, the plot boiled down to Steve building something insane again, and that formula held up right until it stopped working. Number 10. Urkel had a whole crossover universe. Steve Urkel did not stay contained to his own show. He crossed over into Full House, into Step by Step, another TGIF staple, and even into Migo, a short-lived sitcom about an alien nanny played by Bronson Pinchot that lasted only 6 episodes before quietly disappearing. This all happened in the mid-1990s, well before shared universe became a phrase anyone used about network sitcoms, yet Urkel had one anyway, bouncing between TGIF shows like he owned the entire time slot. Number 9. The show jumped to CBS for its final season. After 8 seasons on ABC's TGIF, the block that had basically built its identity around this show, Family Matters, left. Season 9 moved the show to CBS, folding it into a new family comedy lineup built specifically to compete with the network it had just left, which meant the same show on a new network was now scheduled head-to-head against the very lineup that made it famous. Family Matters spent its final season going up against the network that raised it, and that is the kind of decision that sounds reasonable in a boardroom and plays out very differently once the ratings come in. Number 8. It was canceled after 1 season on the new network. The CBS move did not work. Ratings fell fast enough that CBS canceled the entire new family comedy lineup after just 1 season, Family Matters included, and burned off its remaining episodes in the summer of 1998 with barely any promotion behind them. A show that ran for 9 years, defined a network's Friday nights for most of the 1990s, and turned a background character into a national catchphrase ended quietly instead, dumped into a low-visibility summer slot that most casual viewers never even noticed. 9 years on the air, and the ending basically slipped out the back door. Number 7. The series finale sent Urkel into space. Somehow, this show about a Chicago police officer's family ended with an actual space rescue. The 2-part finale, titled Lost in Space, has Steve win a science contest that catches NASA's attention, and the agency recruits him as a student astronaut to test one of his own inventions in orbit. Once he is up there, a satellite strike damages the shuttle and leaves Steve stranded outside the ship, drifting, before he manages to save himself and everyone else on board. A show that opened with a doorbell ringing and a Winslow family dinner closed out its run with its most famous character floating in space. And that is not an arc anyone saw coming back in 1989. Number 6. Reginald VelJohnson has been candid about working with a young Jaleel White. Reginald VelJohnson played Carl Winslow, the family's patriarch, and arguably the show's emotional center across all 9 seasons. In interviews since, he has been fairly candid that working alongside a young Jaleel White, once Urkel's popularity exploded, was not always easy, even as he has had nothing but praise for Jo Marie Payton, who played his on-screen wife Harriette, and who he has called one of the best people he worked with on the show. It is a small detail, but a rare one, the show's own patriarch acknowledging on the record that there was real tension behind the scenes. If you are the kind of person who wants to know what was actually happening behind the scenes of your favorite 1990s shows, hit that like button and subscribe to the Throwback Network, where new videos drop every week, and there is a lot more of this waiting for you. Number 5. The cast raised concerns about being sidelined. As Urkel's popularity took over more and more of the show, some of the adult cast reportedly felt like they were losing ground in their own series. By Payton's account, she and VelJohnson raised the issue directly, sitting down with producers for conversations about the direction the show was heading, and her summary of how those conversations went was simple. Nothing changed. These are actors describing their own experience rather than a documented studio memo, but the account lines up with what a lot of viewers noticed happening in real time, a family sitcom slowly turning into a one-character show. Number 4. Tension between Payton and White reportedly boiled over. By Payton's own account, the friction on set eventually became personal. She has described a moment where tension between her and Jaleel White escalated, serious enough that co-star Darius McCrary stepped in to separate them, and according to her, that incident happened during what turned out to be her final regular episode on the show. This is one side of the story, told by one person who lived through it, and White has not offered a matching account in detail. Even so, it is a striking claim from someone who spent years playing one of the show's most central characters, and it lines up with the larger pattern of behind-the-scenes strain that followed Urkel's rise. Number 3. Harriette Winslow was recast for the final stretch. Whatever was happening behind the scenes, the result played out in public. Jo Marie Payton left partway through the final season, and Judian Elder stepped into the role of Harriette Winslow for the remaining episodes, which meant one of the most recognizable TV moms of the era was not played by the same actress by the time the series wrapped. It is the kind of change that is easy to miss if you are not watching closely, and impossible to unsee once you know it happened. Number 2. Steve Urkel's longtime girlfriend died shortly after the show ended. This one is not a fun fact, just a fact worth knowing. Michelle Thomas played Myra Monkhouse, Urkel's devoted and relentlessly optimistic girlfriend for several seasons, and one of the sweeter relationships the show built over its run. In 1997, Thomas was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, and she passed away in December of 1998, just months after Family Matters ended, at 30 years old. It is a hard detail to sit with, especially set against a show built almost entirely around comedy and catchphrases. But it belongs in this show's real history, and it deserves a place on this list, not as a punchline, simply as a fact. Number 1. Steve Urkel was only supposed to appear once. Here is the one promised at the top. Steve Urkel was introduced in an episode called Laura's First Date, partway through the show's first season, written as a one-time guest character, a nerdy neighbor kid who shows up, causes some chaos, and disappears. That was the entire plan. The audience reaction was immediate and overwhelming. People loved him, and producers brought him back, then brought him back again. And within a couple of seasons, an entire show built around the Winslow family had quietly rebuilt itself around a character who was never supposed to get a second episode at all. Everything else on this list, the tension, the recasting, the space finale, all of it, traces back to that one decision to bring him back one more time. The most famous supporting character in 1990s sitcom history was not even supposed to get a second episode, and decades later, people are still talking about him. Conclusion. That is 15 things about Family Matters that go a lot deeper than "Did I do that?" This is a show that started as a straightforward family sitcom and ended up somewhere nobody could have predicted. With a breakout character nobody planned for, real tension behind the scenes, and a finale that sent its biggest star into orbit. If there is another TGIF-era show that deserves this kind of deep dive, drop it in the comments, because I read them and I am always looking for the next one. Thanks for watching. This is the Throwback Network, and I will see you in the next one.